If you have your Bibles, Proverbs 16. Proverbs 16, verse 9. There was a period of time there during worship where kind of, in the spirit, you could kind of feel it kind of hush down a little bit. And it was almost like I was feeling like God was saying, listen real closely, because it was, the still small voice. The Bible talks about the still small voice, and so I encourage you today, there's the subject we're going to be talking about. Sometimes the stuff that happens in your life, that clouds around your life, that tries to bring a bunch of noise, sometimes you have to listen really closely, especially when there's a lot of noise. And I just kind of had a reminder during worship, like, just try to calm everything down and listen really close. And even sometimes when there's not a lot of noise, sometimes you have to listen to God's still small voice. But Proverbs chapter 16, verse 9. Now this morning, this message, it's going to be a message I'm going to preach, but it's also kind of a transformation I've went through personally, and also a testimony of some stuff that's going on in our life. And we wanted to let you guys know this because this church supports the ministry that James and I have in many different ways. And we want to let you know and update you on what's going on with us, because you guys are a huge part of what we're doing, going outside of this church and reaching people in different ways that you might not know about. And I'm going to let you know about that today. But in Proverbs chapter 16, verse 9, this is what the verse says. In their hearts humans plan their course, but the Lord establishes their steps. In their hearts humans plan their course, but the Lord establishes their steps. You guys might have heard some of our story because I've talked about it a little bit in testimonies here before. And Pastor Dennis had here to do a Camo church service for our ministry. But a lot of people don't know our ministry started in 2004. Hunting the Truth. James has the shirt on back there. You can see that big logo with the bright sun on it. That started in 2004. And from 2004 to 2011, we were praying that God would open up doors and expand our ministry. Part of our ministry is we minister to men and women in wheelchairs and fatherless youth. But we also have a speaking ministry. James and I have a book, and we go out and speak at different events. We were praying that God would expand our ministry and that we could reach more people. And we even sat down and said, okay, here's a plan of how we believe that we're going to do that. And we set out the course. We can do this, we can do this, we can try this, and we can move ahead with this. And we were moving ahead on our course. We were moving ahead on the ways that man planned. And then one day, James and I were actually sitting together where I lived at the time, and we got a phone call from a man who was the owner of one of the largest hunting companies in the world. And the company is so big that when he said who he was, we laughed and said, okay, which one of our friends is this? Who's playing a joke on us? And he said, no, this is who I am, and I'm from this company. And we said, yeah, we know who you are. You're a very famous person. And what can we do for you? And he went on to tell us that there was an issue with certain things, a trademark issue that we had, and that if we did not change our name, then they would force us to. And we said, uh-oh. At the time, we didn't have an office. The little money that we had, we took people in wheelchairs and youth out. And if you can see the name of our ministry, it's Hunting the Truth, and we believe the name that we have obviously portrays Jesus and who he is. And so we had a huge decision to make of what we should do, because obviously you can't fight a big, huge company. It was a true David and Goliath story. And I'll tell you that when I got off the phone, James and I are twins, identical twins, but we had an identical look on our faces. We looked at each other with this look like, and the look was, if you could say what the look was on our face, it was this question: God, what are you doing? What are you doing? And in that question, we say, what are you doing? But really what it means is, God, why did you allow this? God, why is this happening? God, what are we going to do? God, I can't believe that this would be you. All these questions are, what are you doing? To make a long story short, we prayed about it. We talked to some people, and we prayed and decided that we should take a step of faith and stand for our name because it meant Jesus. And from that point on, God just totally opened up doors, and we were going to Spring of Life here at the time when all this was going on, and the church prayed and rallied around us, and it was a great experience. God actually worked it out. A long story short, we got to keep our name, and what happened benefited our ministry greatly. After the year-long legal proceedings that happened, what we didn't realize was that our Hunting the Truth Ministries name was getting out all over the country. We were getting phone calls and emails and messages from people saying, we heard about what was going on and we're behind you. I mean, obviously people were really upset because there was legal proceedings against an organization that took out kids and people in wheelchairs. And Christians and non-Christians alike, and I'll tell you, it was non-Christians too that called us and said, we are behind you because this is not right. What we didn't realize is that we said, God, what are you doing? And we didn't really trust God, and we took a step of faith. At the beginning, we did not trust God. We go all the way past that, and you go after it's all done, and we realized it wasn't supposed to be the question of, God, what are you doing? It's the question of, God, what are you doing through this? What are you trying to do through this? If we read scriptures in the Bible that says God works together good, always works together for the good of those who love him. Do you really believe that? He says he'll never leave you or forsake you. Do you believe that? He says that he'll always provide everything that you need. Do you really believe that? When we got off the phone call, we were faced with those questions. Do you really believe that? And us saying, and I have no problem admitting it, our faith faltered for just a little bit. We said, what are you doing? God, what are you doing? It was a question of non-trust. It was a question of doubting God. It was a question. And I mean, I can probably honestly say that a lot of people would have had the same question, but at the same time, we all face things that we get a phone call or something happens, and the first thing is we ask a question, what are you doing? And what I learned through the whole thing is that if you really believe God's promises in the Word where he says that he's in control, that he'll give you everything that you need, that he works all things for good of those who love him, he'll never leave you or forsake you. If you really believe that, then you won't ask the question, at least you might at the beginning. Because another thing is I want to let everybody know this. If you are way too hard on yourself normally, don't be too hard on yourself about this because it's a journey. Just because you might doubt and say, God, what are you doing at the beginning, does not make you a person that doesn't have faith. It doesn't mean that. It just means like you're shocked. Like, whoa, let me process this for a second. It's okay to ask God, what are you doing? David asked that in the Bible. What are you doing? But through the transformation afterwards, when we got done and we looked back and we realized that we were asking God, what are you doing? In a way that we didn't trust God. Really, the question he wants us to ask him through anything is, God, what are you trying to do through this? Because he's always trying to do something, and it's always going to work out for the good of those who love him if you continue on in faith, if you continue to move forward. We can take ourselves out of it. God has promises for you, but we got a part to do too. But the word says that he works all things for the good of those who love him. The only way that you won't get there is if you stop and you give up. That's the only way that it won't happen. And sometimes we think that certain things didn't happen and we're disappointed because we believed it was God's promises. Then you realize later on it might not have been God's will in the first place. He might have had a different plan for you. And it's a better plan than what you had. It says right here, man plans his ways, but the Lord directs his steps. So we got through that, and we realized we're getting phone calls from people saying, we heard about your guys' legal proceedings. Will you come speak at our event? Our speaking schedule went from probably 4 or 5 events we did the year before that to 2 years later, we did almost 30 events that year. Not to mention all the other stuff that happened. God, what are you doing? No, what am I trying to do through it? He was trying to do something through that whole thing. You just got to stay on board. So you move forward, and in 2014, we got a call from a man who had a production company that had a TV show, and he called us and he said, "Hey, have you guys? I heard about what you guys were doing and what happened." And he said, "Have you guys ever thought about having a TV show? There's not twins that have a hunting TV show in the outdoor world. You guys are hunters. You guys do the hunting thing. You guys have a great message. Have you ever thought about it?" And the first thing we said was, well, we don't need another faith project. We don't need another faith project. We've been through the faith thing here for quite a bit here lately. We don't need another faith project. But we started praying about it. And the more we prayed about it, the more we realized that maybe it was God opening up the doors for this. We were praying, and we got some verses in the Bible. In Genesis 1:26, it says, "Let us make man in our own image." That was one of the verses we came across when we were praying on it. Let us make mankind in our own image. That's twins, right? We came across the word factor. The factor means to have the impact on the outcome of something. We said, oh, this is cool. Let's call it Twin Factor. And let's have a TV show. So we started a TV show in faith called Twin Factor. In our first couple seasons, we were on the Pursuit Channel on the Outdoor Networks. Now back up to the phone call we got from this man. God, what are you doing? God saying, what am I trying to do through it? If we never would have stood strong, if God never would have brought us through, if he never would have gave us exposure through that whole thing, we never would, the man that called us never would have called us and heard about us and said, hey, what do you think about this? It created a snowball effect. We get to the point where now we're at Twin Factor. And we had a TV show on Twin Factor, and our goal is to use a platform of television to reach people with the gospel of Jesus Christ. And so we had Twin Factor for the first 2 years. We were on Dish and Direct TV on Pursuit Channel. Then we were on Hunt Channel for the third year. And then COVID hit, and everything took a dip and went this way and that way. And we couldn't even get together with kids to hunt with them because you couldn't be within 6 feet of them. And so that kind of dipped until fast forward to, and this is the testimony I wanted to share with everybody. Fast forward to this past year. At the end of last year, we were talking to somebody on our team, and they asked us about going to the 2024 International Christian Media Convention in Nashville. Has anybody ever heard of that? It's the largest Christian international media convention in the world. Our show actually got picked to be showcased at this convention. So we went there, and they have a voting for awards, and Twin Factor got the award for top TV show series at the International Christian Media Convention. Praise the Lord. And I'm not bragging about us, I'm bragging about what God can do. Keep in mind, though, at the very beginning, because I'm going somewhere with this, what are you doing? We go to the convention. We win a top TV show award. All the big Christian networks are there. Heard about this. They asked Twin Factor to be on. Starting June 1st, we're going to be on 4 different Christian TV networks. On Dish and Direct TV. One is TCT Network, if you've heard of TCT. The Dove Network. We have a Christian television network in Ohio that covers all of Ohio we're going to be on, and then one over in New Mexico that covers New Mexico, Arizona, that area, starting June 1st. 52 million potential homes. They're allowing us to reproduce our episodes where we're putting all of our ministry stuff in there too. Everything we do. Our book, Hunting the Truth, our hunting, everything that we do are going to be in these episodes. This past week, we went down to TCT Network in Akron, Ohio to do our launch interview with their network and their station, which is going to air the week after our first episode airs. June 1st, by the way, June 1st, I believe it's at 5 o'clock, is on TCT, is our debut. We went down there, and when we were leaving the interview, we found out that TCT Network will be merging with the largest Christian network on television. The same look James and I had when we got that phone call after we left that place was the same look we had when we walked out of that place and looked at each other like, God, what are you doing? But this time it was, God, what are you doing? In a good way. But back up. (2011). One of the scariest moments James and I have ever had in our life and in our business or ministry. We get a phone call that says, change who you are, or we're going to do it for you. God, what are you doing? Looking back at it now, it shouldn't have been, God, what are you doing? It's, God, what are you trying to do through this? Because what he was trying to do is get us to the place we're at right now. Step by step by step. And it never would have happened unless we would have got that first phone call. It never would have happened if we would have said, okay, we'll change our name. It never would have happened if this church wouldn't have been praying for us. And our families and people who called us and said, we're here for you. We'll give you anything you need. But it all started with a question that actually doubted God. What are you doing? In their hearts, humans plan their course, but the Lord establishes their steps. Lord, expand our ministry. Okay, here's a legal battle. That wasn't in the course that James and I wrote down about expanding our ministry. That was man's course. God's course was something different. And oftentimes it's like that. God's course is a lot harder than what our course is. Because I believe that God is much more concerned with us building our faith than he is about our comfort and the way that we want to do things. Because in Isaiah it says, my ways are not your ways, and my thoughts are not your thoughts. But my ways are the best, even though they're the hardest. And I'm not saying this today to all of us, because right now, if you feel condemned because you could say, oh man, I just don't have strong faith, that's not true. That is not true. When you doubt God, does that mean that you don't have faith? No, that doesn't. You might have a lack of faith at the moment. But if you're asking yourself today this question because of what's going on in your life, God, what are you doing? Stop and pray for a little while. Talk to God about it. Ask him questions. Say, help me in my unbelief. And then when it all quiet down like it did in worship today a little bit, and you can hear that still small voice, and your spirit settles down, then ask the question, not, God, what are you doing? God, what are you trying to do through this? Because if you really believe that God's in control, that he gives us everything we need, that he works for the good, all things of those who love him, that he'll never leave you or forsake you, that his ways are not your ways, and they are the best. If you really truly believe that, and you stick in there, hang in there. If you're asking God, what are you doing? Hang in there. Just pray. Take some time to get quiet. Talk to God about it. Get it all out, and then change your question to, God, what are you trying to do through this? You might not see it until afterwards. We didn't see it until afterwards. It might be one of the scariest, hardest times you've ever been through. But then, keep asking that question. Every time you feel like you're saying, God, what are you doing? Change your question to, God, what are you trying to do through this? I trust you. So as I mentioned, June 1st is our first episode that's on TCT. Check your local stations because it's different in areas on Dish and Direct TV. We'll be giving everybody times of all the networks that we're going to be on so you can watch the show. But what we want to do is James and I also created this short film series called Hunt More. The reason why we called it Hunt More is because we take the spiritual applications of all of our episodes and we want to hunt more. We call hunting seeking. They have the same definition. Hunting and seeking have the same definition. We want to seek the application of the episode more. And we created a short film that's going to be on our social media, YouTube, Rumble, so that they can go to this and learn more about the spiritual application of the show, because that's the most important thing. Our first one is Twin Factored episode where James and I went to Alabama and we shot. James and I hunted together and we shot 2 turkeys at the same exact time. You'll see it coming up here. I got the video. If you don't like seeing animals getting shot, then cover your eyes. But you're going to see that there was more to that story than what's on the episode. It's called The Setup. And I want you to think about this today as you watch this video. What you think that God is using to maybe stop what God has for your life. If you feel like, man, something's going on and it's stopping God's plan for my life, it might not be exactly what you're thinking. It might not be something that's stopping it. It might be a setup for what you're actually praying for. It might be a setup. James and I had to hunt together, and you'll see in the video, and I'll explain a little bit now before you watch it. James and I went to get our licenses, and because of certain circumstances, James had to get a restricted license that forced him to hunt with me, which I didn't like. I didn't want to be around him for the whole trip. You know how that is. Especially him sitting there with a gun next to me. I didn't want that. But we had to hunt together, and we actually thought, okay, this is going to hurt our chances of getting, we can't spread out and go to different areas, and we're filming for a TV show, which is not cheap, by the way. Back then, at the time, it was not. So we wanted to get footage. But here is the first Hunt More short film that comes from episode 1 that it will air on our social media channels after the TCT episode. You're going to be able to watch it.
The hunt. To seek out. To search for. All the hours we spend preparing, practicing, seeking, searching. All for that moment of opportunity, that moment of reward, that moment of harvest. But what will happen when our season is over? When our tags are filled? When our wall is full? When our once vibrant bodies can no longer climb the ladder or pull back the bow or sit for hours in the woods? What if this searching, this seeking, this hunt is just an illustration to prepare us for a greater hunt? What if we were meant to hunt more?
In life, there are times when things happen that appear to set us back on the plans we had to be successful, only to find out later what God is really doing is setting us up for the success we've been praying for. That is, if we trust Him. This happened to Chad and James Hampton on the Twin Factored episode of Twin Factor TV in Alabama. During the process of purchasing licenses, because of a very unique set of circumstances, James was required to purchase a restricted turkey tag that would only allow him to hunt with another licensed hunter. This meant Chad and James had to hunt together. Disappointed that they could not hunt separate areas for a better chance to harvest turkeys, they had just hoped for a chance to harvest a turkey together and create a memorable and entertaining first episode of Twin Factor TV. After hunting for over 2 days without a chance to harvest a tom, they headed out to the woods on their last evening to hunt a big Alabama gobbler with the setback still on their minds. They still wondered what could have happened if they could have hunted multiple areas of the property instead of just one. What they didn't know was, God was about to take their setback and use it as a setup, as He often does. baby. Factor, double factor, baby, on video. Chad and James thought that being forced to hunt together was a setback to their goal of both harvesting gobblers. Little did they know, God was setting them up. They never would have shot 2 times together if they hadn't been forced to hunt together. God knew what he was doing. What is happening in your life that has the appearance of a setback and looks like it's preventing you from receiving what you are praying for? Look again. God is saying trust him. What looks like your setback just might be what God is using as your setup to receive what you are praying for. God bless, and be the factor. You guys are the first to watch that. Actually, I can't say that. That's not true. The network in New Mexico they're airing our short films also. So we've gotten favor with them. But first of all, this is what the support from this church is helping us do. We're going to be able to minister to potentially 52 million homes. And we can tell you from experience that there's so many people out there, and this goes for Christians too, that would never step foot in a church because of many reasons. But they'll listen and they'll be open to something like this. It's what they call a parachurch ministry outside. And that's our goal, is to get to people inside the church and outside the church so we can bring them in. Hopefully they find a church where they can be discipled and fed and cared for. So be encouraged, and thank you, and thank everyone here for that, for the support. We couldn't do it without people who are supporting us. And last, if you're asking yourself today, or asking God today, what are you doing? Just stop and pray and wait and ask the question, God, what are you trying to do through this? Let's pray.